recording,
awesome.
guys.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Because I think so. Daniel said he can't make it. Václav said he's going to make it halfway through. So Václav asked if we could delay the chat about MQTT because he's interested in talking about that.
Okay. Right.
So he's not going to be around until a bit later. He's fixing up his house in Czech Republic.
Isn't that the whole meeting?
What was that?
Whatever.
Yeah,
we can think of other stuff to talk about. We got to fill an hour and a half.
All right, so Johnny, tell us some stuff about high school, man.
I missed something. I'm getting a message from someone. What's going on?
Oh, I was just asking you to fill in the time until Václav comes.
Oh.
No, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got other
That was
stuff
mostly
to.
sarcastic, but
Oh, I think we can fit in the time. We'll be okay. So Adrian, I just confirmed that the request that you asked for has been completed. So now we've got the mapping of the DNS that you needed.
all right, cool.
So that should be that. What was it?
What was that for?
That's Grafana and Prometheus. Is that right?
Yeah. So we had talked about doing monitoring before, but I found a Helm chart made by the Prometheus community that sets up a high availability slew of images. So it sets up like 10 things on Kubernetes, and it helps you monitor Kubernetes itself. So that means we could see CPU usage and things like that. And if any pod is kind of going crazy, one of us could get alerted on it. And then it also can take data from the backend APIs, and every time anyone hits those APIs or has an issue with them, it'll tell us how often they get hit, how long the average time is for a response, and things like that. So I had deployed it internally in the Call for Code cluster, and then I deployed it to Grillo, and I was like, all right, we might as well use a real URL. Otherwise, we're gonna have that gigantic, auto-generated IBM URL that nobody ever remembers. So I'll set that up in the next couple of days or maybe next week, because right now I'm having a lot of issues logging into Kubernetes for Grillo's account for some reason. Like when I click on the dashboard, it's all day it's been kicking me out or banning me and rate limiting me, etc. So it's just not working.
Yeah, that's been my problem with the. I think that was the problem with the dashboard, because yesterday you couldn't log into the dashboard, and then when I thought maybe we could just restart the pods or something on Kubernetes, but it won't even let me into the Kubernetes like dashboard area. So I think it's just like outages or something that are coming back online. Yeah, I checked it today. You can log into the dashboard today, so maybe some of that stuff is resolved.
I don't. I mean, the dashboard itself, even though I've had issues with the Kubernetes dashboard, right? So like we're using dashboard a lot, but the OpenEEW dashboard seems to have been fine. Well, I just don't know when it's going to get resolved. But in any case, right now, the stuff I deployed to Kubernetes, Grillo's account, Grillo's Kubernetes, it's not even providing me any data. Otherwise, I would show you guys my screen, and then, you can see random stuff live. I could show you what it looks like on the Call for Code side, but it's pretty much just live.
Well, so
data.
it would be like monitoring.openeew.com or...
No, I put it. I suggested we do Prometheus.openeew and Grafana.openeew because they provide different things, right? So the Prometheus is like the time series database, so you could look at things through there, and then Grafana is the part where it organizes it into charts and things like that, so that you could just eyeball it. But Prometheus does the alerting as well. What's up?
Then you have to create the Grafana charts.
So the community that I set up, the community chart that I used already has some of that set up, especially for the original Kubernetes clusters. Let me get off Slack, and I could show you what it looks like for the internal. Let me see.
That's great. You can just bring in the JSON to copy the chart over, right?
Probably.
Wait,
what do you guys see right now? You see my tab? My browser?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, can you see this here? All the little colors and stuff?
Yeah, with the fun URL.
Yeah, with the this is the URL I'm trying to avoid right now, right? So this is on the Call for Code account, and typically like you would see this and you're like, all right, where's all the data? But if you go into search, this cluster is the deployment that I was using automatically sets up these little categories. So in the workloads, for example, so let me make this a little bit bigger. And the workloads, you get to see all this. You get to see your CPU usage, your memory usage, and things like that. You could check specific pods. You could check Oh yeah, and you could save dashboards. Right now I have no dashboard saved, but this is for everything in the default namespace. And as you can see, I have this is the VernMQ that I originally set up. This is Sysdig, which is an IBM monitoring tool that I tried first before doing this. And then these are all the containers that were deployed by that Prometheus to keep it up. So there's the Prometheus operator, Grafana, and then something to gather metrics. So this is kind of what it's going to look like. You can, like I said, you can narrow down to be specifically focused on a pod. So we could be able to come in here and say, oh, what's the memory usage for VernMQ? Why is it running slow? If we see any issues and things like that.
Cool.
But yeah. So it's still in the early stages. I mean, this right here is pretty popular. I mean, powerful. I mean, I don't even know how to make a dashboard yet. This was just given to me like in this form. Oh yeah, what's cool too is the bandwidth. So it tells you how latency issues and things like that. So it's probably more information than we will ever need, but I figure there's really no problem with having more data than we could use.
Yeah, that's great. We use Grafana in Grillo, and we used it before we had it. Well, we still use it, but we weren't able to create a custom dashboard, so we just used Grafana because in Grafana you can. Because earthquakes really are time series data. I mean, that's that's what Grafana is, and that's what earthquakes. That's the data we all deal with now. So this works really well with a couple of sources, including all the time series databases. The names escape right now, but anyway, it's very easy to plug and play.
Yeah, Grafana is definitely cool. So that, I mean, there's some work that we actually would need to do to enhance the backend. So the Node.js APIs that Brian's been writing to communicate with and send data to Prometheus, which will then get charts on its own. So if you got, like, just so you know, this is the official one on OpenEEW's account, but it's not working. As you can see, there's no data being sent because the whole cluster is just in flux right now. And then, like, as you can see, when I try to get on the dashboard, it just spins forever. And then eventually, if I keep on refreshing, it'll kick me out and say, oh, you got rate limited, and, go away for a little bit. Yeah, so that's it for me.
And John, I saw you made some issues today on for firmware.
Well, remember, I was collecting feedback on what I could work on. So I was thinking through what the implementation might look like. And so I got, it's closing like 1,000 tabs. I'll share my screen in a second. Oh, look at this. I even had the ESP32 cam. It's $4 on eBay. I may have to just buy that. All right. I can't lose that tab. All right. I think I got everything out of that one. So there was one issue here. So should I share? We'll talk about.
Yeah.
Oh, unless there's any dashboard topics that we want to talk about.
No, I've got nothing.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So that's the website. Anyways, for the first time in about 10 months, I had to close Firefox. I'm rebuilding all my tabs. I usually have like 20 windows open, each organized by topic. So this is now my earthquake topic. So we have any new things that we were doing on the website?
No. Well, unless we talked about them on Friday.
Oh, the footer, right? Didn't we get the footer in?
Yeah, footer's in. But other than that,
it's here.
Nothing specific about any of the sections or anything like that.
Okay.
Just one question: if no one else has anything to say, or maybe John has something to say right now.
God, if you have got a topic, I'm navigating towards the issues.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering, has there been any updates with React Native?
Was that discussed on Friday? I missed the meeting.
It was discussed on Friday, and the task I took was so there's a bunch of different smart config libraries, and for which I don't know React, so it's not like I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I thought I was just going to fork or clone the repo, the React provisioner repo, stick in one of the smart config repo libraries and see if I could smash it in there.
Do you at all know JavaScript?
Oh yeah, I know JavaScript, but I've not
And
played with.
if you know HTML, React should not be too difficult to pick up.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
React
it's all
really
back-end stuff.
What do you mean?
The smart config is all just back-end.
Oh, so it's not front end.
Yeah. Well, I'll take a look at it and see what.
So
I really didn't want to be the provision.
Yeah. So so what I did is I actually went ahead and spent a good afternoon installing all of the stuff I needed to do to create. I had to update Android Studio and install some plugins and get the stupid so I could visual, because you can't use the virtual Android device on to do smart config. So I had to connect my phone, which was a bit of a hassle. Anyway, I got it working. So I'm just going to see if I can do the same for Xcode. So at least we have an option in case we can't get it to work on React Native. There is a possibility it might not work.
Yeah.
I'm worried about.
Luckily, if you won't have the same issue getting it to run on your mobile device for a current setup of React Native, because you can just download an app from the App Store and then scan a QR code and it'll load the app for you.
Awesome.
That's like a 5-second process, and it'll download the app from your local host and it'll do everything. So you don't have to even install anything apart from that app, of course.
Yeah, so I'm still going to pursue this because I'm still a little bit concerned that library might fall behind what the OSs are doing. But let me do that.
I should say that we also for the dashboard on Friday. One thing I should mention is we're trying to shoot for a July 1st or June 30th. Let's call it July 1st date to have version 1.0 of the dashboard done. So we're trying to create some deadlines for ourselves to to keep us working.
Okay, that's good. That's good. What do we have to do to the dashboard?
The events page needs to look better and work because right now there's no live data on it. There's just some cleanup stuff with the sensors page. There's a lot of like back end cleanup stuff that needs to be done. We probably need a production build for the cluster for the to within the container it's running in. So yeah, the events page is probably the big like functional thing. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of kind of deployment and back end cleanup stuff.
And so the events page is going to read from the database, and the database is going to be populated by the stuff that Vaclav's doing, right? So
yeah,
so we still are waiting for that to become production.
Well, he has data in the cloud and database that we could use. So how it gets in there is, I think, what he's working on now with the MQTT. But and the dashboard will have to change over some of its MQTT configuration also if we move to Vern MQ. But it should be much because we used a pretty generic library to connect to.
Yeah, you should only need to change the secrets on Kubernetes.
Yeah, I guess we're not changing anything else, right?
Yeah, well, hang on, because there's topics change. That's what I like to spend the whole morning trying to figure out how to do topics with Vern MQ and subscribe to topic namespaces. That's the tricky part.
Yeah.
Why are they different?
I'll get to it when Vaclav.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for that, I think so. To comment on that, like not to really get into VernMQ, but is it possible for us to make the topic names and have them be part of environment variables as well? So if those change, it changes across the system.
Potentially, I mean, right now in the dashboard, at least, the topics are hard coded, but
Yeah,
trade them out
do
for
the
something.
same thing.
Let's let's just get it to work once. Please.
Yeah.
Because so it turns out there are 8 there are 8 commands, and there's the event data. So there's really 9 topics, and the 8 commands. So there's the accelerometer data, for which you use event status. So this is the topic for the data, and what you'll do is, if you want to subscribe to all devices and listen to the data from all the devices, you would put a plus in. So this is how Watson IoT does it. I don't know how Vern works.
Well, so I'm a bit confused about it, because from MQTT is a standard, right? So
yeah,
I'm assuming Watson IoT is conforms to the standard of MQTT, and
yes.
And so all of these forward slashes, that's all MQTTs I've ever seen use that format,
Right.
and then the plus, I'm pretty sure they all use that as well.
Yeah.
And they also, for wildcards, you can also use the hash. So I don't see how this would be any different.
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't be different, and that's sort of what I opened this ticket this morning, because I was thinking through, like, we want to use the matching topics because we already have these commands.
Yeah.
And so there's eight of them to send commands. So things like beep the buzzer, blink the light. There's check firmware, change the threshold. I document them all in this. We're somewhere down below here. There we go. These are the 8 commands.
Right.
So we just want to make sure that we are going to use the same ones.
But wait, so can you stop there for a second? So if you, because that's interesting to me. So when I've created MQTT topics in the past, like, I would probably have just simplified. I mean, I think it would work exactly. I would have just called the first one /earthquake. But the fact that you've got all this additional information is fine. I mean, we just use it as is, right? That right. Would work.
Yeah, that's what we have to go test.
Yeah.
That this is the convention that Watson IoT had established. So I just want to bring it over. And then I list examples of how to communicate with both the local broker, and I had tested this months ago, where I was able to use a topic of and I used the same convention, so that's good, right?
Yeah. What does that command earthquake do at the end?
That was just me doing an identifier. That's probably not needed. I needed it just so that I knew what commands were coming through, because I had like all the different commands I wanted it. Because otherwise, if you're just watching, if you start the broker, you just see this, and you're like, "What was that?" And some of the commands don't have have different parameters that you messages that you send to them. So I just preceded all of them with what the command was. So you could list in the local broker would spit out in its log the like what command it got from what host.
Got it.
And extend Excel. So what I want to go do, so one of the things I was thinking through here was, before I start hacking through the firmware, is to write little tiny test harness scripts using Mosquito Pub Mosquito subscribe so that I could, kind of do it correctly. The last thing I want to do is spend hours writing, cutting up code, try to put it together, and then I'm not sure if is it my bug or is it an MQTT topic issue. So I was just going to try to get it right from the CLI. Once I can get it right with the CLI, then it becomes easier to actually do it in code. That was sort of my thought. So I was going to use this particular ticket to work through making sure all of everything I say here in the firmware. It also would be helpful that, because I'm going to need to update this page with the VernMQ. So that's one of them.
It seems to me, John, that I can't see why we just can't keep the topics as they are, and it should work just fine.
We probably should, right? We should probably just be able to do that. I just need to go practice.
So, well, Vakalov's in the call now, but so when you guys are talking, there is a doc, I linked it in the chat, that says the plus and the pound sign work on VernMQ similarly to Watson IoT. So Andy, you're right about that. Vakalov, you did some testing. I don't know if you used the same topics that we were using previously to send data to VernMQ. To talk on that.
Yeah, it was exactly the same. I just swapped the credentials to VernMQ, so it worked. Yeah, it works just fine for any topics. Sorry, I missed the beginning of the TownHall or half of the TownHall, so
that's okay.
Don't know exactly what you talked about, but yeah, the topics work the same. Yeah, I didn't change anything on those.
Okay.
So what else is different? The authentication is different, right? That could be that's another kettle of fish.
So that's kind of starting. So let's. So I wanted to, sort of. I didn't want to just hack the code because then you're like, fuck, it doesn't work. You want to go and be methodical about it. So you build some building blocks, and I was just going to lay foundation. Like, hey, I can do this with Mosquito Pub and Mosquito Sub, and then just poke at the broker in the Kubernetes cluster. And, from my device, well, not even from the device, it's just from my laptop, can I run the commands? So that was sort of the first two tickets here. And then I was thinking about naming conventions. I'll get to that in a second. This is sort of the big one to connect to a variety of brokers, localhost or local subnet, Watson IoT, and VernMQ. I got one ticket that talks about the NTP client and dropping that in. Thought that was that would be a useful addition. It's a pretty small, I already have a function here that is called set ESP time. And I call it in 2 or 3, I think once a day, it calls itself. So there's a timer. You guys had asked for that. I put it in a release or two ago.
Can I have a question? Sorry, John. Just regarding time, I read somewhere that the precision of the internal clock at ESP32 is about 5%, or the error that may happen. Okay. And right now we are syncing once a day. How much power would it take? Like, not necessarily that we would need to do that, but how much power does it take to do the syncing, or how much trouble would it be to do it, let's say, every hour or every 10 minutes? Is that a problem, or?
It just seems. I guess it matters for seismologists. It seemed like way overkill, but if that's what you want, I'll put it in. It's seriously a timer at the bottom of this function.
Does it work in the main? Does it work in the main loop, John? In the main loop, is it every now and again?
Yeah. I'm finding there it is. So the main. So here's the main loop, right? And so at the bottom of the main loop, after it does all its STA, LTA, it does this little function. And so it basically has a variable. So you call time, and then you minus the periodic time, and then if it's greater, then resync time, which is a hard-coded value. And at the top, I think I set them somewhere on the top. So anyway, it's a very simple little control.
How large is this file, though? It seems fairly large.
The firmware is about 2,000 lines of code.
And one go, wow.
Where did you set the daily frequency, the period?
Here we go.
There you go.
So over in the H file, I've got resync time. It's resync that. So yeah, all I have to do is change that value to some number smaller than once a day.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want you to change it necessarily. I was just wondering how much power or like how long it takes to sync. Like if it's a millisecond operation or if it takes 5 seconds to do.
Oh, it does actually take a while. At least my implementation which I wrote a long time ago because I was having trouble with it. So what do they call it? Set time or something? There's periodic time global variable. And it does, maybe this is a little redundant. So what it does is before the time sync, it prints out the time. It calls two different, so time, and it's NIST and pool. So two different services. So if one was down, I figured maybe the other one would be up. So essentially that's the config time reaches out to them and sets its time. And then what happens is it waits for the time to actually be written to the board. So you can be in this loop for a while.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, you could be in this loop for a very long time.
So in an ideal world, this would be running on the second core.
Sure.
Potentially.
Yes, that would be awesome.
What's that time function? It's just out of pure curiosity. Why are you giving it the null pointer?
Which one?
Time null pointer. I wonder why you're giving it a null pointer.
Oh, so the way to get the current time is time's a function in Arduino and ESP expressive, and you give it, if you want to know the current time, you give it 0 or null. You give it null, and then if you want to go set the time, there's like a bunch of different parameters to it.
Oh,
but in my case, I only do it. I'm only asking for the current time. Anyway, we would replace this function with whatever the library, the call to the library. Essentially, in this function, we would sort of do this, and we would delete we would delete this section here, and we would put in the call to the library. So it looks like it's relatively straightforward. If I go and figure out how the examples work, it's probably an hour or two of work, not a lot of time. And if you want, Vaclav, if you think there's value in syncing the time more frequently, then it's just a matter of changing that H file to something.
Yeah,
more than once a day.
I wouldn't worry about it right now. I think it's fine. We take like a combination, or we're gonna take combination of the cloud time and the device time. I was just wondering, like, if we can get to the precision just by using the device time, but it doesn't seem like.
I'd rather use the library. Yeah, I think it would be good to use a real library instead of my little function here.
No. I was more like wondering because that, like, you sync it and then the clock and the ESP32 is not very precise. But if we were like, if it just took us a millisecond to ping the server, or not a millisecond, but very short time to ping the server and get the response, and we can do it every minute or so, we might be getting very precise time from the device itself, and we don't need to take a timestamp from the cloud. So I was just wondering, like, how much time it takes to get the timestamp. But if it takes a few seconds, and especially now if it runs in the main loop, I wouldn't worry about it, and we can leave it on one day, and I will still be using the cloud time as the accurate one. So yeah, I was just wondering. We don't need to worry about it now. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good idea to put it on the second core. I have not played with multi-core stuff.
It's actually, I might have a go myself because it's actually really easy. Just basically at the top of that code, you add the task handle T. This is just a tutorial that I was looking at. And that task handle T, you assigns it to either one of the, you basically declare that there's a task on a particular core. And then further down, when you have the actual function itself, that's when you say that's when you actually write your function, but you assign it to that task handle. And that's it. Should be straightforward. In this example, what they're doing is they're blinking 2 LEDs at different frequencies, one on each core, and they're running in tandem, and they go off sync in real time. So because they're both using different different delays.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh, that's cool. All right. And then where was I? There was some bug here. This was we've got a user in, and this was awesome. He's in, I think it's he, and he's in the Philippines.
Oh yeah.
And his board is in. So it turns out the Philippines is on a seismic fault lines, and so he's like right outside of the main city in the Philippines, and when his SSID is hidden, and he would power it up, it would go into smart config mode. He would use the mobile app, pass the credentials to the device would connect. Then if he took a power outage, it would come back into, even though it stored the data for the SSID, it didn't actually reconnect. But if he plugged in Ethernet, it would work, hardwire. But so then asking him questions, he tells me that his board, his Wi-Fi is hidden. And so that was a little bit of a surprise because the firmware sort of down at the bottom does a compare. It does a scan. It's basically, it's trying to figure out, do I know this network before? And so it enters this Wi-Fi scan and connect type of thing. And what it does is it reads all of the SSIDs and the passwords from the NVRAM. So sort of a non-volatile part of the ESP32. And then it loops through for all of the, so if you scan and it finds 10 networks where you are, it does a compare to the ones that you've got in NVRAM. And if there's a match, it says, oh, I got a match, let me connect to it. The problem is it was actually this little equal sign does that's a string compare on names. It's not. So it turns out with the hidden one, there's no name. So I have to go change this logic and store the BSSID of the Wi-Fi router.
But John, just that sounds like a bit of work. I mean, it's very unusual to not have a name on your SSID, isn't it? Can't we just rather say people should have a name on their SSID?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I wasn't going to work on this first. It's a good bug. Someone else could work on it if they want to go and figure it out.
So you've created an issue for this, right?
I created an issue. That's all I did.
As long as we have the issue, we can.
And I basically, in the issue, I say, go change this function. And Like if someone were to
Okay.
come and drive by, I would basically, I'm telling them what line of code to go change, but you got to test it. Oh, so this was fun. Because I can't mess with my kids' network anymore. It's driving me crazy. So I found an old router, and I flashed it with WW DRT. And so now I can do hidden network testing on this thing and test networks. So
Why didn't you use OpenWRT instead of DDWRT?
I don't know.
I tend to find them more up to date.
Oh, that's what I used to open. Well, when you go to that, OpenW.
So I used to use DDWRT, and then I found that the open ones were more up to date, at least for the ones that I had.
I don't remember what I flashed. It was last week. It was like one of these midnight things. I'm like, I just got to go do it, and so I did it. It's off right now.
Huh.
Maybe I picked the wrong one. I didn't pay attention. I was just happy to find that old router in my drawer. I got like 6 of them.
Me too.
All right, where was I?
So you go through your issues. So this one is not the most important, but it's good that we've flagged it at least.
Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioned the guy in the Philippines. There's a couple of people who recently acquired sensors. There's a whole load who were bought in South Korea. Do we have earthquakes in South Korea? Anyone?
Honestly, I don't know. I would have to check.
No idea.
Yeah.
But we probably have nuclear explosions from North Korea. I don't know about earthquakes.
Yeah.
Well, there are definitely earthquakes in Japan, right? Because they're on the Ring of Fire.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Let me check South Korea. I can
sort of tell.
And several in the States. And also, I've no idea if anyone's been buying the sensors from China, because they don't give me any updates. But hopefully we'll see those pop up in places.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so I'm assuming that if the earthquakes are in Japan, it sort of stretches up to this Korea. The Korean peninsula is here.
Isn't it further down? Is that Korea?
Further down?
Yeah, North Korea is to the left.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Further south. Yeah, there we go. West.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was going north.
Yeah, it's basically touching Japan, isn't it? It must have something.
The main fault line goes, as John was saying, the Ring of Fire. That's the subduction of the Pacific plate. It goes on that eastern side of Japan, so they are kind of hidden behind Japan. So it's not as dangerous as in Japan. But I wouldn't be surprised if they felt like the magnitude 9 that was in Tohoku, if they felt it quite strongly. But they are not as much in danger as Japan is.
Yeah, they got Japan to shield them from the tsunamis too.
Yeah, that's
right. Maybe we can have a Japanese. Well, the Japanese have a network, right? A national network.
Yeah, they've got a good one.
Yeah, a really good one. Yeah.
Okay, so those are my issues. I sort of was thinking through how I was thinking through the client IDs too. Anyway, I would just spend time thinking through how the client IDs could look. And I convinced myself that I just need to go test on some of the topic spaces.
So client IDs. Why can't we just use the MAC address?
Yeah, well, that's sort of what it does. The way the Watson IoT builds the client ID, it does org device type device ID. Sort of maybe unnecessary, but if we're going to keep the same structure, then I was just going to replace the Watson IoT org with VernMQ.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And in that way, everything else in the code was going to stay the same.
That makes sense.
So I was thinking through like how to make the minimal number of changes in the firmware and then control. So the way I'm going to do this is over on the activation tab. There's an entry point for activation. So when the boards wake up, every time they power on, they talk to this entry point here. So it's just an HTTP post. And then later on, it gets back like a whole bunch of details on where to get the firmware, where's the MQTT host broker. And so in version 1, I have the Watson, and in version 2, I'm gonna, which does very little in this little section of code right here. Right now, it just returns. Well, actually, I think I hard code some values here, which is way too small for you guys. But I hard code some values that is going to return. What was, you told me this over here, Adrian, this 5CFF address.
Yep.
And eventually this will be, mqtt.openeew.com.
Well, maybe. So far, I haven't. Okay. It doesn't seem like Ingress can communicate with VernMQ.
All right. Well, at least right now, this was working in my little hack at the firmware 2 weeks ago when we chatted. So I think I got a pretty good path now. I know how to change the cloud side of it. And I know where I need to make the changes in the firmware. And, with a little bit of test harness, it's hopefully not a ton of change. The best bug fixes are like make changes in like 3 lines of code and then just add all this new feature is my goal. So I'm looking to make, it's a very small amount of change.
I feel like now is a good time to try it out because, the beta users at the moment are really just a handful of us, aren't there? So I think now is a good time.
Yeah. Well,
tell us what we need to do to help test all of this, or if there's anything we can contribute to here. I'm a bit scared to go into Node-RED because it looks very complicated.
Yeah, well, I think what we could do, together, I think Adrian and I made some good progress just by me spending time on the command line. And didn't I write some scripts, Adrian? I forget. What did I do? I wrote some scripts. So this is what I started to play with. I didn't put this in a repo anywhere just because it has, I think I was putting the credentials in. We got to come up with some better, the credentials important, but then we had some crazy passwords that were like hello world, right? Is that what I remember? I won't say out loud, but they're in in these shell scripts here is whatever the hello world passwords were.
Yeah.
You used the credentials from. That's what you did.
Yeah. There's two. There's one that is basic and then one that is not basic. But yeah, we gotta. I can take that out.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I hard coded it. So, but that's why I don't want to cat any of these files because I know we're recording. But I was kind of fooling around with this, and I got to go and once I can get it working on the command line, then I know I can make it work in the firmware, and then it should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to put the cert. That was the other thing. I've given up on this whole spiffs thing because spiffs doesn't update when you do a firmware upgrade. So I'm just going to put it right in the firmware itself. That way I always know I can read and I have the certificate.
That makes
I got
sense.
a question: is Vakalab, you wrote some test scripts to test VernMQ as well. Is there any overlap with what John would need to test with what you've already done?
Well, I don't really think that I wrote test scripts for that. I just changed the MQTT to set the endpoint as a VernMQ. So, but I don't think that what I did is that, yeah, also, if you mean those scripts, I also wrote some test scripts to test the latencies when I was sending a lot of messages through. So yeah, I did those, and I can definitely send them to you, John. But that's really just, it's the same as for the Watson IoT endpoint. It just takes the credentials and puts the certificate in. I don't think that the Watson IoT was using the certificate. Otherwise, it's exactly the same connection. So it's really nothing special. And for the seismology scripts, I just changed the credentials too. So, environment.
Sorry, the latency problems you were having, Vaslav, that was resolved when you plugged in Ethernet?
So yeah. So like I was sending those graphs through, and the final one, yeah, it was when I plugged in the Ethernet. So when I was just using it with Wi-Fi, there was this like funnel effect that I started to see increasing latencies with about 50 messages per second. So it stopped taking it at that rate because of that upload speed probably of my Wi-Fi. And then when I plugged in the Ethernet, I was able to get through about 500 or 600 messages at the same latency, which was about 100 milliseconds per message for each of those. And there was no funneling effect anymore. And 600 or 500 was the maximum that my computer was able to publish per second because it was just done by looping. So I couldn't really test it above that. But I think it's fine for now. I was also trying to... Yeah, sorry, Adrian, go ahead.
I was gonna jump in because that 100 milliseconds is really high, but that's normal for where he lives.
Yeah,
like sending that information to Washington D.C. So
from Eastern Europe, everything takes just so long.
Yeah.
It's actually not too bad based on those numbers that you sent me, Adrian, the expected latency of the connection. So like the VernMQ seemed like performing very good all the way up to those 500 or 600 messages per second. And then we would have to figure out a way how to increase the message rate, probably just sending from multiple machines, or there's also something like that you can publish multiple messages at once. But I was testing that out and I couldn't really get it running. So
I think in Node-RED you can do that. I once tried to do something similar.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was triggering 10 devices at the same time to test how they would work. I forgot how I did it.
Yeah, maybe in Node-RED you can do multiple.
I mean, if we containerize the test cases, we could just deploy them onto Kubernetes too. But this is good because we talked about this a couple months ago about us like really hammering whatever MQTT system we use to make sure that everything is working. So we got Seismology's got one. John's talking about doing one on the firmware, and then we got to make sure that the dashboards are able to get that information too.
Yeah, that's true that there is so many more components to test with this message rate, not only the MQTT, but we might have some other bottlenecks too. Yeah, but sorry for
No, that's important.
Because
it's not just me making changes; it's the changes have to reflect in all your scripts too.
Yeah, but I think that like at least from my point, from like what I was testing, really changing the MQTT was just the matter of like adding the certificate and then changing the credentials in the environment variables. So it was very straightforward. I don't know what changes it requires to be done in in the firmware, but from Python side, it was pretty straightforward change.
Okay, that's good.
So just to finish the MQTT discussion, then, Adrian, you had worked out how to put it on Kubernetes. Is that right? So really, we just want to make sure it works before we go live with this. Am I right?
You're right. Oh, well, it is on Kubernetes. What was what else?
Oh, so it is actually running right now.
Yeah. So I deployed it first on internal call for code account, and then I deployed it on the Grillo account. So I believe it's in one of the two clusters that are on your account, and that's the one that John's been pinging and Vaclav's
Got
been
it.
testing.
Got it. Right.
Cool.
Yeah. So I mean, there's not that much to do other than I want to set up monitoring. So the stuff I showed you guys at the beginning of the meeting to tie into VernMQ, so we could get that live data to get alerted whenever things slow down. Because the one thing that there's like a little bit of concern about, even though Vaclav kind of proved that we don't need to do much about it, is we have like one CPU running everything in OpenEEW. So it's like, right now there's only us using it and touching it, but if we get, a bunch of devices in, I would imagine that the dashboard is going to take a lot more memory and CPU to maintain. And same thing with VernMQ and, all the little pieces we have here.
How easy is it to change in Kubernetes to suddenly just add another node to the cluster or upgrade the machine?
Well, so you can have Kubernetes auto scale, so it'll just automatically add workers, and then the workers are like they split their resources off amongst all the pods, and then we could also say for every microservice we have, we want a minimum amount of CPU and a minimum amount of RAM, and then it will ensure that that service always has that minimum, and then of course we could do maximum for each piece as well. But that's a little bit hard because we have to do some capacity planning, right? Like when you have Node-RED, for example, it's like how much CPU do you want to use? What's the min and the max? And then it's like hard to gauge what you really would need. But we can play around with it now that you have more cloud credits. We can go ham on this. Do one CPU per service or what have you. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be crazy expensive. It's like 11 cents per minute or second or something like that.
Yeah, we're rich until January.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what it would do is if we go big first, over time we'll be able to see how much are we actually using with things like Grafana will tell us, yeah, you're using 10% of what you deployed. And it's like, okay, we can scale back then.
Okay. Yeah, so if I understand you, then it's good not to throttle it now, so we can see its real usage, and then later on we can adjust accordingly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some of the stuff will scale linearly too. I don't think that we're gonna get the Google traffic on the dashboard, so I don't think we're gonna have to do crazy load balancing or what have you.
So how fast does it auto scale if you set those min and max limits? Does it auto scale if there's an earthquake and suddenly there is 10 times as many stations reporting? Does it scale as fast as we need it, or?
I would say unlikely, because the reason why I say that is because when you do the early warning, right, you have like a couple second window there for things to respond. So that's why it makes sense for us to kind of get a gauge of what's the minimum, right, and then we could turn on the auto scaling if we want to, just in case. But I think the auto scaling is probably going to be most useful for things like the website, where you don't really need it to be fast instantaneously. But when it comes to the critical pieces like VernMQ, that has to be set up correctly at all times, and I think we shouldn't rely on auto scaling with that one.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I have to go to 4 p.m. But
yeah, me too.
I haven't seen anything.
Okay, I sort of know what's coming next for me.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a few.
You seem to dread it.
It's just a time slice because I have other work stuff. I have to do that.
Are you doing other call for code stuff, John, right now?
I have so tomorrow I speak at a Node conference, the Nearform's running a conference, so I do a workshop tomorrow, and then Friday morning I've got a weather company project I'm doing a live stream. If anyone's interested, awake at 7 a.m. It's really lunchtime in
Oh, that's 6 a.m. for me.
Yeah.
That might be a
yeah, Johnny. So it's sort of it's supposed to be lunch, like a lunch and learn, but UK time. But it's 7 a.m. So I'm one of the speakers on that conference. But that one's done. I just finished that little example.
Do you work on the Weather Channel stuff?
So yeah, so not well. I'm so weather buff, and I have they gave me access to all these APIs, and so I've been fiddling with the APIs. I basically build my own weather dashboard now, which is kind of cool because the API, when you just go look at it, it gives you a bitmap of the radar or of the heat map. And so what I do is I take all the tiles at the zoom level that you specify, and then I stitch the tiles together, and then I get a base map from Esri, and then I take the base map and the weather company tile, and I composite them together. And then I get myself so I did a North America radar map, and you click through, and then the weather company API will give you 15. You ask for a timestamp, so 15 minutes, and then last 15 minutes, last 15. So you can go back about 3 hours. So I can do a time lapse of it's easier to show you. It's actually, I have it running in Code Engine. I had fun with Code Engine the other day.
So you can do a time lapse of weather going across.
Yeah, it's like wicked cool.
Because
cool.
one thing, Václav, we want to do one day, presumably, is be able to show sort of intensities. Like I would love to see an animation of an earthquake moving across Puerto Rico, and sort of showing a map of intensities.
Oh, yeah. So it turns out there is an earthquake API. Of course, now it's cold, so it's got to warm up. You might have it. I don't have it run in local.
I think I might have to go because I have an exam tomorrow, and I think I need my sleep.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck, Johnny.
Yeah, we'll see you, Johnny.
Best, mate.
See you.
One. Bye.
That's the trouble. I might have broke it. Let's see if it warms up.
Yeah, but it would be cool, Andy, to have something like that. And
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say I've got plans for that on the events page of the dashboard.
Because with 90 sensors, or potentially 100 and 200, you have enough points there that in real time you can have a really good heat map moving. I would be so excited about that.
I'd like to see the animation of when the sensors pick up stuff, and you can even have a sort of waterfall of the list of sensors that have detected and their waveforms as they pick it up against the time of when it started.
Yeah.
That would give me a lot of joy.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Oh,
they actually do have a weather. They have an earthquake API. So this is, you can see it's sort of hot in the middle of the country right now.
This is updating all the. So what's the frequency on this? It's like every second.
Yeah, so I'm playing every second, 15 minutes. So it goes back 15 minutes ago, 3 hours ago, and then plays 3 hours in 10 seconds.
And pink is really hot, right?
Yeah, pink is really hot. And then so the UV one's obvious, where the sun is. So that's where the sun is right now. And you can see the sun crossing the US.
That's
cool. Really cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and then wind. So basically it's a bunch of tiles that I get from the weather company that I stitch together, and then I get the base map and I split them all together, and I wrote it in Node-RED.
Is there some sort of a library used that stitches together images?
Yeah, I worked. It's a library called. I put it over here. Image.
I didn't know you could do this stuff outside of Photoshop.
Yeah, no. This guy showed me. They've got it. It's going slow because it's in Code Engine, but basically what I do is I get the two tiles and then I stitch them together, and then I don't know what I was doing here. I kind of you blit them together, and then I do a composite over here. I composite the base map and the whatever tiles I just got from the weather company. And
I'm sorry, I'll have to get going too. But
yeah, anyways, so this I'm going to do on Monday morning, on Friday morning.
Have a good one,
my little and of course it's a Git repository, so you can go and you can go do follow all the code steps and how I built it. It's in my Git repo.
That's very cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Have you ever, John? Have you? I don't know if they have an API. They have to have an API, but the ads, the government service for aviation weather, has like all this crazy data in it that is sort of fascinating to look at, because it goes beyond kind of what the consumer weather information has in it. And the website that they have is looks like it's from like 1993, but it'd be cool to like combine it all into one. It has all like the convection charts and all the different stuff and whatnot going around the United States. I kind of like weather too.
Yeah. So anyway, last week I was playing with the weather because I know this conference is coming up on Friday morning.
Right.
Anyway, so that's
very
done.
fancy, very fancy.
Yeah, that was all done. That was last week's play time. And then I've got the Samsung project too with the phone running containers. Alrighty, I got to go.
Okay. Okay, guys.
All right. I'll see you, Andy.
Good night.
Bye.